Welcome back to Ron's Radio Corner. And I have an idea about how to save AM radio. It's not completely my idea. It's an idea that my cousin mentioned, and then as we kicked it around a little bit, we fleshed out to what I'm about to talk about. So he said to me, what if AM radio was opened up so that podcasters and local musicians or independent musicians had the opportunity to broadcast over AM. Now, in theory, you probably could do that. Part 15 allows for local broadcasting, but you have a very limited range, and you also have sort of a limited audience. So I said to him, what if you took this a step farther? What if you created a network of radio stations? And I know there are networked radio stations, but what if you created a network of radio stations that were basically able to get their content from music or podcasts or any other programming that you uploaded to a server. And then you would be able to identify what that program was, and maybe identify where you'd like it played. And that could be something where this program would identify that there are certain stations already that are that format. Let's say you're talking sports talk. There's already certain stations that are doing sports talk. That might be jazz, and you recorded something in a jazz format, or American Standard. Maybe you're reggae, and there are reggae stations out there that might be interested in this. And then instead of broadcasting it on your local AM station, it could broadcast over multiple small, low-powered AM stations. I'm not talking about trying to take something that you've put together and suddenly have a big 50,000 watt trying to broadcast it, but small radio stations. And I know nearby to me there are a couple of AM stations. Well, there's an AM station. They broadcast on two different AM channels. One is talk radio, the other is foreign language programming. And it sounds pretty good. It's not FM quality, but it sounds pretty good. It's definitely listenable, particularly on talk and even on music. So my thinking is, if you upload an original composition and it's jazz, and now you'd like to be heard, you could definitely put your music up on YouTube. Lots of musical artists have used YouTube as a way to get an audience for their talent. But now you could potentially open it up to a bunch of AM stations across the country, where otherwise you're sort of confined here. And then you'd have the ability to do things like go to your fan base and say, hey, if you want to hear my music when you're on the road, it's going to be playing at these times on these AM channels. So if one of those is near you, give it a listen. And if someone tunes in to hear your song, maybe they like the song that played just before it and just after it. On top of that, I imagine AI is doing a lot of the program selecting. You put the songs in there. There's slots that are being filled out. Maybe you have a hand in saying kind of what you'd like, but the AI is sort of coordinating all this. And then it might even be the AI that's doing sort of all the stuff a DJ does. This is the 7 o'clock hour, and here we are playing easy jazz, and here's our first selection. But I imagine these local radio stations could and would have people still manning them and selling local commercial spots, because if there's something interesting to listen to, maybe you can sell more revenue than you are today. I know radio stations, this is how radio works, right? I mean, you go around your local community and you're selling spots, and it's the local tire shop and the local dentist office and the local bank that's advertising on AM radio. This would just give them more reason if you gave them more programs. I think the challenge for AM radio is that there's a limited, shrinking market of what's being played on it, and then in tune, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that leads to a slightly smaller audience, and so on and so forth. And of course, there's the ability to go and stream today anything you want to stream and look up on YouTube or on your laptop or whatever else, right? You're not, how we get our music and our entertainment has changed, something I've talked about. So why would this work, or why would this be any different? Well, one, because the content creators would be doing it for free because they'd want their content listened to, and this is really sort of that YouTube model, right? I mean, TV stations are spending good money to try to find content that you'll watch. Streaming platforms are spending good money to develop things for you to watch. Streaming music platforms, I guess a little bit different. They're not spending good money. From my understanding, is they're paying artists sort of paltry sums. But here's a situation where one of the most expensive part, I would think, of operating a radio station is the content that you put on it. See, the talent that you're paying. Some radio stations, I think, will actually sell blocks of hours, and someone comes in, they have their show, about this or that, and then, they're trying to find the people who will buy the commercial time during their block of hours to help pay for that. Maybe I don't know exactly how that works. Maybe they split some of that revenue with the radio station itself. Well, this would be a bit different. You're a local artist, you'd like to, or you're a small artist, someone's trying to get known, you'd like to have your music played on the radio. You're probably just looking to get your content out there. Hopefully you can promote a show, maybe you can gain a little more attention, maybe you can get some more people to go listen to you on Spotify. Maybe you're someone who has something that you think is interesting to say, something like this, although maybe a little more entertaining than this. And so you're putting together your program, you're putting it out there, hopefully it's finding an audience, and away you go. Now, for this to work, you would need either government to step in and say, here's this program, this is a government program that's going to run on these stations because AM's important and we need to find a way to save it, and this might be the way to do that. Or government is probably going to partner with private corporations to sort of do something like this. And I suppose it doesn't necessarily have to be, hey, let's resurrect a whole bunch of radio stations that have sort of gone defunct, or really are doing next to nothing, although that could be part of it. But you could also take radio stations that are operating, and you could provide them with blocks of programming, and they could buy in for maybe those hours where they're having the most trouble finding original content. My local AM, I noticed, has been playing an hour of music every day. They basically talk radio, and suddenly there's an hour of music, and they have a name for it, the whole bit. But I wonder if they've just found it challenging to find anything that'll get any ratings in that spot, so they just fill it with music. So you not only could you basically take a radio station that maybe is defunct and rekindle it, and let it play this programming, you could have other radio stations that sort of subscribe in, and a block of their hours becomes this programming. And as long as whatever program is aware of what radio stations are out there for it to broadcast at certain hours, you basically, it'd almost be like an FM transmitter or any transmitter. Like I broadcast off my laptop, I tune it in. Basically, radio stations would just have to say, okay, for this segment, go to this server to get the content. If suddenly I feel like belting out a song and I record it, it doesn't mean that song is going to be played on all these radio stations at the exact same time. This server could intelligently say the jazz hour for this radio station is 7 p.m. For this station, it's Saturdays at 8 a.m. For this radio station, it's 1 a.m. in the morning, and so whatever content you upload potentially could be played at all different hours, all different days on different stations across whatever this network is, which could be across the country. Do I think this will happen? Probably not. Do I think it's an interesting idea? I think it's probably a more interesting idea than letting AM stations broadcast over FM, which I really don't get. And I've read some great stuff online where people have sort of talked about how silly that is, the concept of AM, and I would agree with that. I think it's probably a better idea than the idea of putting together something like digital AM, which would basically render every AM radio that's currently out there as obsolete. So, I think this is something that sort of touches on what I've talked about in other videos, or at least in the comments that I might have left, which is I think radio is a really incredible idea and concept. The idea that you have this little box that you can turn on and you can pull in all sorts of signals from all over the place. And at the same time, broadcast or the broadcast end of radio is pretty fascinating. You got a microphone in front of you and you're talking into it, and people all over the place can hear your voice. That's pretty magical. But my problem with radio today is I find very little I want to listen to. And I think that's true with a lot of people, which is why all these streaming platforms have become the way I think most people get their music and their entertainment. And I've said just recently, I think in a comment, that if we're reaching into a drawer or into the closet to grab a radio, only on those occasions when there is nothing else to connect us to the world. Internet's down, cell service is crap. And so suddenly you're forced to grab the radio. At some point, there's going to be nothing to hear because no one is going to keep broadcasting stuff on the radio if it doesn't make any sense cost-wise, right? They're going to, at some point you got to turn that radio and it's going to be silent because all the the radio stations are going to have moved to the internet, or they're going to have moved to other platforms. So that's the thought. Could AM radio enjoy another life if the platform, I guess if it was turned into a platform that was opened up to content creators to create the program that you'd listen to, and the number of people who are doing that on something like YouTube, and the number of people who are watching it, makes me think that this would work on the radio. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of kinks to be worked out. If you happen to like a particular program, how do you make sure you hear it every week? I'm not sure about that. But it's definitely an interesting concept, and one I think would be sort of interesting to explore further. So, love to know what you think in the comments, and thanks for listening.